So our next presentation is from Thomas Brady. So we're looking at, Thomas will be talking about architectural treasures, creating public engagement with the retentions debate through immersive visualisation of the Perth Pensioner Barracks. So Thomas Brady is an urban planner with a background in architecture. He's passionate about heritage, built environment ethics and the decision-making processes in complex socio-cultural contexts. And he's currently with Curtin University. So please welcome Thomas.
G'day everyone. They've got me behind a podium today. Normally I like a microphone, but I forgot to ask. But on that note, I'd like to say thank you everyone for coming in after lunch and staying here. I really appreciate it, and everyone online as well. And thank you to DPLH and the heritage team for setting this up, and all the various sponsors and things. We all really appreciate it. And I'd like to also extend that thank you to the Indigenous custodians as we convene here today on unceded land. All right, without further ado, all good? Yep, much better. All right. So firstly, I hope the presentation's good. I had AI make it on the way over, so we'll see. All right, so activating the Perth Pensioner Barracks drawings through visualisation. So this presentation is the what, why and how of this project. And if you were to summarise it in one sentence, it would be, we developed an immersive visualisation desktop experience to bring to life the State Library of West Australia's archival drawings, architectural drawings and images. And that was essentially the core brief that we were given. So this was a partnership between the State Library of Western Australia and Curtin HIVE. This was conducted through a research internship which was very graciously supported by the State Library of Western Australia. And this was conducted over 3 months between November 2023 and February 2024. So just for background, if you guys don't know about Curtin HIVE, it's a wonderful facility as part of the Curtin, research technology space. It's the hub for immersive visualization and e-research. And it's just this really cool bunch of technology that Curtin researchers can use if they feel their research could benefit from integrating with the latest cutting-edge visualization technology. And when they're not helping Curtin researchers, they're running this summer internship research project. And it runs every year, and they just had a brilliant one where a lot of good partners. So if you are from an organisation and interested in, looking at something with visualization, I would suggest getting in contact. So I had fantastic advisors, 4 advisors for this project, as well as the support from the State Library of West Australia Heritage and Engagement team. So I had 2 Curtin advisors and 2 State Library of West Australia advisors to guide me, but I was the sole student in developing this. So we met weekly and talked about the best way to approach and navigate. And ultimately, it was a fantastic experience that they really provided a lot of direction and insight. So the problem is that the State Library has all these drawings within their collections that are unfortunately collecting dust that the public cannot see. And so the State Library came to Curtin HIVE and said, what can we do about this? Is there a way that we can actually get all of these drawings, all these architectural treasures out into the public viewing? So the objective that they set was to create an immersive experience, allow for advanced interactive public engagement. So it begs the question, which architectural archives? For this project, we developed a shortlist criteria. They had to have a rich enough collection of architectural histories, but not just limited to drawings, so videos, photos, any audio recordings or written media to be able to supplement and support the overall presentation of these drawings, because This was to be an exhibition where all of these could be put together, but the visualisation project was the core attraction and driving engagement. But we also had to draw on these materials in order to develop an interesting experience. So they had to have an interactive story that would engage today's public, because as you know, we all have very short attention spans. And it had to align with the State Library of West Australia's objectives and future direction. So, as you could tell by the title, we chose the Perth Pensioner Barracks. And, I'm sure as this is a heritage conference for all history nerds here, but in case you're not, the Perth Pensioner Barracks was designed in the 1860s to home the pensioner guard force. It was designed by Richard Roach Jewell. And as we got convicts, they originally settled, stored them in Fremantle, but they came up to Perth. And so we needed somewhere to store the guard that looked after these convicts. And they came over on the ships. And there was agreement that if you came over and did a little bit of time working as a guard for the colony or for the settlement, then you would get some land. But this is where they had to live. So yeah, it was designed 1860, so quite a while away now. Interestingly, or at least I think so, and I'm going to make you all listen to it, in the turn of the century, 1900s, it became the Public Works Department, where C.Y. O'Connor's office was. And with a little bit of a spoilers, but it did lead to the creation of the National Trust. This is because in 1955, someone came up, don't know who, maybe it was Stevenson, that's why I named Stevenson Plan. I didn't look it up. They proposed the idea for Perth in the 90s, what the city would be. And part of this plan was that the Perth Pensioner Barracks had to disappear. See, it sits at the front of St George's Terrace, and behind it is Parliament House, which looks down onto St George's Terrace, and this was just an eyesore that was in the way, and so it had to go. And so they got to ensuring that the plan was enacted, and they demolished the side wings, and then they left what remains here in the photos highlighted. Now, the reason they did this and was against the plan is because there was a public outcry, a public protest, and they hadn't expected this. This was the first time in West Australia's history that there had been such an avid public engagement with the idea of conserving a building. And it was closely linked to anti-government sentiment with the Vietnam War and various things. But there was a huge rally to save what remained of the Perth Pensioner Barracks. So the newspapers had a whole field day with it, lots of puns, it was great. I was there. Arch rivals making hay. There was one about the Premier at the time, they called him the arch nemesis. But there was even a protest song that they developed that they sung on site. So WA had stood up and made all this noise and asked for it to remain. And what did the government do? They kept pulling it down. And luckily, as I said, supplementary material, we were able to find this from the State Library's archives of pulling down the remaining wings on the side, leaving what we have today, the arch at the end of St George's Terrace. And then here is a photo of it today. So that's a bit of a background on the context, the building that we are bringing to life today, the architectural treasure. But ultimately, this was a research project. It wasn't just making a very cool model. It had to have a research element behind it. And so we figured out, how can visualization be used to create active engagement over passive? And by active engagement, I mean actual deeper understanding and thinking and critical analysis. Not what we all do when we go to an exhibition where within 5 minutes we're thinking about the lunch reservation and, hopefully because this session is after lunch, this isn't going on in here, but we've all done it. But active engagement actually has them deep in conversation about the content they're engaging with, that they're thinking about, having discussions with each other, making arguments and debating. And not just through that, but through actual visualization itself. So instead of just having very, very beautiful drawings on the wall that you kind of view at and go, you know, that's nice, you have this active engagement to the point where you actually miss your lunch reservation. So to do this, we moved from the GLAM sector, which is galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. We went into the video game research area. I thought, could we actually find a video game framework? Because there's a whole sector of educational games where people have done a lot of research into how do we make these really engaging? How do we capture audiences and actually convey information, educational information, whilst keeping their attention spans? And luckily, through a literature review, I was able to find exactly the framework I needed. This framework ultimately breaks the experience, the game experience that it sets up, into 4 different levels. There's a cognitive level, where that is an intellectual understanding of a concept, of the history. There's a psychomotor, which is actually a physical, almost touch level interaction. There's affective, which is an emotional connection, kind of feeling something for it other than that is on an emotional level. And meaning making, which is ultimately what we're after. It's that deeper active engagement where the person going to the exhibition actually makes their own interpretation. It's not just what's fed to them. They actually leave having a view that they didn't necessarily have before, that they've made themselves. They thought about something new. And this framework was very luckily based on heritage and history, and it breaks heritage up into what existed and history into what happened. And you guys can debate if that is what heritage and history are, but for the purpose of this framework, very conveniently, it lets us say what existed, the building, the history, what happened, the previous uses, the demolition, the protest. So ultimately, I developed a video game experience. As you can see at the bottom photo, we're having the public try it out. This was a desktop computer game with a keyboard and mouse, but it was designed to be scalable. So inherent in the game engine is the ability for it to be turned into essentially like an iPad game, where you could have a kiosk where the public could come up and touch with a touchscreen, play around with it, or with VR. So the idea was we didn't want to restrict the State Library into just one use. And so that was a core thing as part of the coding of the visualization experience itself. And then we applied, in applying this framework, we looked at it in developing 4 different levels, and each one builds on the previous and explores how can we get to that next stage of active activation. Hard to say. Active engagement. So this first drawing, dated about 1890, was constructed when the building unfortunately had a fire, and the second floor, parts of it got damaged, it needed to be rebuilded, and we were very fortunate in the Records Office to find some very old drawings that were, I think, commissioned as part of that rebuild. And so bringing this into that first level of active engagement, we have recreating and overlaying the drawings onto what is there today. So this is something that we see on actual real sites, where we overlay the drawings over to the existing remaining, which you can see here, and we get a cognitive understanding. So the first stage is very at the replication. There's an intellectual understanding, how it fits together, how it was. But an element of this one is that you can't actually do that today. You can't do it on St. George's Terrace because you'd be standing in the middle of the road. So that was the first level, a cognitive understanding, using the drawings with this immersive visualization. The next level, we had this very, very beautiful brick arch detail. And so why not actually bring it in the game and be able to manipulate the arch detail itself? So we made it so that you could pick up the brick and play around with it, and it's got physics. So you can see how there's weight behind it and how it drops. But you can also break the whole structure and then it falls down. Here you get a cognitive understanding once again of how a brick functions as an individual, as it is as if you're holding it, but also as a collective brick in a whole structure with force on it. Then we also get a psychomotor sense, especially if this is adapted to VR, where you can actually pick up the brick. Now, if there are any architectural nerds, you know about Louis Kahn, and I've added this in because I am an architectural nerd. I think it summarizes there's a really beautiful poetic nature to brick. Louis Kahn said, you say to a brick, what do you want, brick? And the brick says, I like an arch. And then you say to the brick, yeah, I do like an arch too, but it's expensive and it costs a lot of time to build. Like a brick arch is expensive, costs a lot of time to build. I could just use concrete instead. And then you say, what do you think about that brick? And the brick says, I like an arch. And it really, I think, says something to you have to respect the material, and brick knows what a brick wants to be, and you can play around and adapt it and use it very beautifully in ways that Louis Kahn did with the research centre, but fundamentally it is a brick. So we had those two levels. We had cognitive and psychomotor, but can we go further? What if the player could actually build? So we developed this system where it actually allows you to place the modular blocks for the pensioner barracks and rebuild it as it was. The thing here, though, and the thing I think is really beautiful about it, is that the drawing becomes the guide on how to fit this together. See, this drawing has been sitting in the archives for 100 and, I'm an architect, not an engineer, so my math is not great, 125 years, maybe more, just collecting dust. But suddenly, it's returned to what it once was, a set of instructions. So that's what architectural drawings are. They're instructions for how to build the building. So yeah, no longer is it just a beautiful piece that sits on the wall that people come in and go, oh, that's a very nice old drawing. It's actually it's returning to its original use, where we're giving it love, we're activating it, and using it how it once was intended. So we still here have a cognitive and a psychomotor level of understanding. Cognitive understanding of how the building goes together in a very blocky, modular sense. But then there's also the psychomotor sense of actually putting it together and figuring that out, especially if it was adapted for virtual reality. And that leaves meaning-making and affective, which is the emotional connection. So therein lies the rub. For those are quite hard things to actually achieve. If anyone's created an exhibition, they'll know this. But what if we did an Uno reverse card? What if we asked the player a question? How much do they think should have been conserved? What if we provided them with a way to answer? What if the player could break the building? So there you go, you can break the building, or you can actually rebuild it. And that becomes that's ultimately the whole purpose. We have the player making choices. They've got to build the building from start, and so you get an emotional connection of putting it together. This is something that you have brought back to life. You've used the drawings, and now we're very Machiavellian asking you to demolish it. But it gets the player thinking, how much should be demolished? How much should remain? And we've tested this with a select few public at various openings and things, and you've got very interesting surprises. A lot of people are just, they're purists. They want the whole building. They think we should just go back to St. George's Terrace and tear up the freeway, which, there's a petition over on the right to do that. But there's some people say, I just like the arch. I just like that it's a small thing that they can see on their drive every day in, but the space is actually used for a contemporary purpose and activated in a way that allows the city to grow. So there's a whole bunch of very interesting perspectives. I had one little girl who picked it up amazingly, like the technology, the controls, it was like second nature. She made the building, demolished it, but then actually made her own building. She made a Frankenstein pensioner barracks where she tested the limits of the technology and put pieces together that weren't meant to be together, and really had a lot of fun with it, which was, I think, the best thing to see. So, as I said, we get that effective emotional connection. You've embodied all of this energy into making the building, figuring it out, bringing it back to life. But then we've asked you to demolish, or at least choose if it should be or how much. We get that meaning making, the thing that makes you forget your reservation because you're debating the person next to you about how much should have been kept. And it all comes together. We have an activation, a visual experience that is cognitive, activates the cognitive, psychomotor, affective, and meaning-making levels. But also engaging with West Australia's history. What happened? This is an event that happened. It spawned the National Trust, and people see it every day. The beautiful thing about this is that it allows for further engagement opportunities. We can collect this data and we can actually understand how do the public who are not trained professionals in heritage, how do they feel about conservation? We're giving them a voice, a way to engage that we have not necessarily had in the past. But it's also a proven replicable model that the State Library can use for all of their other drawings, a way to approach how do we get these architectural treasures out of their archives into the public, so we can ultimately engage future generations for, hopefully, decades to come. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. That was very interesting. Get a bit of a crink in your neck up the front, though. It's like looking up to that big screen. Any questions for Thomas from the audience?
It was mind-blowing.
It was very interesting. Have you got any other projects planned?
Not currently, no. But if you want one, maybe.
There you go. You can hit Thomas up in the afternoon tea break. Okay, so don't know. Okay, so we move into. Thank you. No questions. All perfectly answered. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.